now. I got a really good cleaning recording this morning, so hopefully that's an issue of the past. Just going to get into the document here. Okay, so reversing and changing verification discussion. So you could also call this the reversing and changing experience discussion. This is Zhang Sanfeng, or maybe one of his disciples, basically talking about the experience of some of the higher level parts of practice. And so this is going to go it's going to go down a bit of a rabbit hole, but it's worthwhile to understand where the practice is going. And then as we keep working through the document for the rest of the month, you'll see that it jumps around a lot. So what my impression is that basically he tries to put everything up front and then explains it in a little bit more detail going forward. So even if there's a bunch of stuff that seems really out there or inaccessible today, it'll be explained in more detail as we go forward, and I will do my best to also explain what he's saying. So he says, before the beginning of the practice of the 7 turnings and 9 changes, first you have to set the orifice of embracing yang with true yin. Okay, so right off the bat, right, this is the key thing to practice, is that when he talks about the true yang orifice, he is talking about the sea of qi. So this is the sea of qi. If you look at acupuncture books, there's acupoint on either side of the lower abdomen called the sea of qi, or the qi high point. It's basically like, again, it's pretty much in the same place as the cavity of qi. It's off to the sides. They don't mean that you need to focus on those acupoints. The sea of qi in Taoism has a slightly different meaning. It means basically the entire lower abdomen, about 4 fingers width under the umbilicus. That entire area, it's sort of like an empty cavity. On most people, it's like the size of a ping pong ball or a golf ball. On me, it's more like the size of a tennis ball, but that's okay. It used to be like the size of a small watermelon, so we're making progress. But that cavity, it's kind of empty and open, and it allows the breath and the mind to nestle there. So when he talks about the sea of qi, that's what he means. But then, so the question is, what in the heck is a yang cavity embraced within true yin? So this is the basic idea, is that in that cavity, our original essence, a little bit of our original essence is stored there. What we associate with the kidneys, what we've been talking about in regard to the internal kidneys and the external kidneys, the yang qi inside of the kidneys can be accessed in that place. So there's a little bit of yang essence there, but it's not typically available to us as something that we can work with using the intention. It's under our ability to intend, because it is it's an intrinsic thing, and it's not like qi that we can move around in the body. So to access it, then because it's associated with birth and generation, according to the theory anyway, because it's associated with birth and generation, we have to return back to this state where we can imitate our original creation, our gestation, and our birth. So this is the pre-heaven state, which is essentially predicated on placing the mind into a state of pure yin. So this cavity in the lower abdomen, sometimes it's called the yin earth, or the yin kun tu, the kun earth. Kun is like 3 yin lines or 6 yin lines in the hexagrams, right? And so this area is considered to be very, very yin, but it has the potential for yang inside of it. When we place the mind there and we place the breath there and we calm ourselves down and enter into a profound state of silence and stillness, then this is a pure yin state. And that's what causes the yang to become available in the orifice. Just a sec, I just have to let somebody in. Okay, good. So that's what causes the yang to begin developing in the orifice. it's the method, or the physical idea, is that basically the spirit, the feeling from the spirit, is directed into the abdomen, and we focus on very, very calm and quiet, and then that yin from the spirit, it mixes with that little bit of hidden yang from the essence, and they come together and they form a combination, right? A new life, which is yang being embraced by yin. So the spirit, the yin feeling, embraces that essence without us knowing, right? It's during that period of practice, it happens underneath regular coherent consciousness. So it enters the interior golden cauldron chi hai center. Now, this is a really important differentiating point, because we hear about the cauldron and burner in Neidan, and every school of Neidan has a slightly different conception of what the cauldron and burner are. And in this document, he's saying, well, the golden cauldron is the chi hai cavity, is the sea of chi in the lower abdomen. A lot of schools of thought call that the burner instead of calling it the cauldron. It doesn't matter. But when they say burner, what they usually mean is a point from which the energy is warmed by placing the intention there. When they say cauldron, they usually mean a receptacle for the energy after it's already been moved. But in this case, he doesn't use the term burner, he uses the term cauldron. It doesn't matter. So then it meets with the lower orifice true yang and is harmonized and brought together. So again, the key point here is that you place the mind and the breath into the lower dantian, in that space under the umbilicus, and the true yin is able to generate true yang. So it's just the same as night turning into day. That's exactly the analogy I'd like to take with that you can take with you. It's also like the winter solstice generating the spring. So yang, after that, embraces genuine yin or true yin, and so then one's own original spirit becomes apparent, or is occurring there. Now, at the very outset of practice, your original spirit will not be bright. So it's a very small amount of consciousness that's located in the cavity of chi, or in the sea of chi, as you're meditating there, and it's all mixed together. So the yin and yang are mixed together, and so the yang begins to have an effect. It begins to warm the space up, but the spirit isn't immediately apparent to you. That comes a little bit later, once it's more fully developed. So then the original spirit belongs to the three hun. So what are the three hun? I'm not going to give you the religious interpretation. You can get that somewhere else. The three hun basically refer to the yang aspect of your physiology, period. So basically, if you look at it from the perspective of, let's start with the 5 elements, and then we'll move to something more practical. If you think about the 5 elements, water generates wood. So water generating wood basically infers that in your body you have an original yin essence. So that yin essence is like your sexual fluids and the stuff that allows you to do complex digestive processes and stuff like that. And that yin essence is located in what they call the water palace. So the sea of chi, the cavity of chi, another name for it is the water palace. So that yin essence is contained there, but it's got yang inside of it. And the yang is the original physiological drive to life, what they call Ming, or life energy. From there, that generates yang energy in the body. The yang energy in the body is, they say it's wood, it's hun, right? The hun, or the masculine spirit. That energy, it moves everywhere, right? That's the idea, is that the kidneys generate the liver, but the meaning of that is that, from the perspective of this practice, is that our essence in our dantian generates the physiological energetic function of the body. Our ability to take action upon things actually emerges from the lower dantian. It's the main energy center in the body that allows all the other stuff to work. Now, if you want to look at it in a more detailed way, which is also true to Taoist practice and it's true to Chinese medicine, you can think of the lower dantian being something like the connection between the Ren and the Du meridian. The Ren meridian is where you are performing all of your reproductive activity, and it's where you're performing a lot of your digestive activity. So it's very important. A lot of your creative ability, your energetic ability, your ability to take nourishment, a lot of it falls along the Ren meridian. But the Du meridian, it's governing your nerves and your brain, right? So all of your sensory activity, all of the things that allow your organs to keep working, they're all connected all the way up the spine by the nervous system and the spinal cord, which goes into the brain. So you have, you can think of the lower dantian generating a lot of the physiological stuff that you have that allows you to maintain the function of your nervous system and your brain. And so in that regard, the brain, which is like the most yang thing in the body, and the eyes, which are the most yang external organ in the body, they are directly nourished by your dantian. But why, right? If you think of it only as an energetic thing, you'll miss the subtlety of it. The reason is because when you eat food, the food enters into your digestive system, and the digestive system just so happens to fall along the pathway of the Ren. So when you're eating food, the food has to enter your stomach, and it's further digested in your lower abdomen, ultimately by your intestines, right? And so this whole structure, it falls along the Ren, and it falls along the pathway of the lower dantian. So it's not like the dantian is just strictly this energetic thing that's divorced from every other aspect of your life. One of the ways you take qi into your body, and one of the ways you take essence into your body, is shui gu zhi qi, right? The energy of food and fluids. So if you don't have proper nutrition, then your energy will become lacking, right? And so, as an example, your brain won't be able to function as well. Your nervous system won't be able to function as well. So all of these things work in a very close relationship with each other. And the idea of an energetic manifestation of something is an element of that, which is what Taoist practice is concerned with. But the way they came about around to finding this particular theory was largely interrelated with the dependence of the body on things like adequate nutrition and the maintenance of the physiological functions associated with what they call the water palace. So the 3 hun, or the yang energy, is generated from there, even though we associate it with the liver. So in the lower orifice, the true yang, so I should say about hun, one more thing. They say 3 hun, this is a religious idea. You don't have to put too much emphasis on it, but the basic concept is that you have a very active aspect of your spirit or of your soul, and that aspect is always going toward the outside. The rationale for that is that your sensory organs, especially the sensory organs on your face, but also the tactile sensation in your body, is primarily concerned with gathering data from the outside world and bringing it in so that you can respond to it appropriately. If it wasn't so concerned with the outside world, the eyes wouldn't perceive out into the environment, the surface of the skin wouldn't pick up sensations from the environment, right? This is entirely associated with you as an organism interfacing with the outside so that you can survive. So hun, it's the aspect of the spirit that takes care of those things. It's a way of describing it. And if you want to look at it, I think as a modern person, it's better to look at it as a metaphor rather than looking at it as a literal, spiritual entity in the body that does all of these things that they claim, right? Because some of the claims are pretty wild. The hun travels out of your head at certain days of the month to go talk to the Jade Emperor to report your evil deeds to him, and so on and so forth. I don't think we need to go that far to be able to have a successful meditation practice. But instead, we could think about Hun as uh, our energies wish to interface with the outside, and all of the things that are directed to the outside then are essentially taken care of by Hun. It's not a receiving thing, it's an emitting thing so that it can go and, obtain information, and then the body receives it through a different process, which is Po. So then from there, the three Huns, in the lower orifice, this pure yang, it is the body's central origin, or central original chi. We could say it's the center of the body's original chi. It belongs to the three Po. So here's the key point, right? They're saying our original spirit, the original spirit being what we have before we think, it belongs to Hun. It belongs to the yang energy of the body. But so it's, let's see here. But the lower orifice, pure yang, is the body center original chi. However, chi belongs to Po. So you might say, like, why is it that chi belongs to Po? Po is a yin spirit, right? So Po is the yin spirit of the lungs. It's associated with emotion, and it's associated with interfacing with information that comes in from outside. So why is it that we would say chi, which is this very active thing, is associated with this yin spirit? I don't think Zhang Sanfeng has done as good of a job of explaining this as some other texts, and so I'm going to supplement it with some other textual knowledge from Xingming Guizhi. The basic theory is that we have an original energetic nature which is not associated with chi. So the original energetic nature we have that isn't associated with chi is associated with something else that they call Ming. Ming is a kind of energy. It's in the taxonomy of existence, Ming is the second thing that comes into existence in Taoism. So basically you have the Tao. The Tao creates, let's say, nature itself. So nature is Xing, or what we call like the original consciousness. It's completely yang in nature. The second part is Ming. It's also yang in nature. Ming means life or life energy, but it also means the ability to live, or the possibility of being alive. And so that can go really deep. I don't want to go too deep today, but just to touch the surface, Ming simultaneously means the generating force of all living things, and it also means the all of the possibilities of all living things. So basically, the lot in life that you're born with is called Ming. It's kind of like karma, but it really means all of the possible things that you could experience in your life are your Ming, which is, associated with where you were born, where you grew up, who your parents are, what kind of socioeconomic situation you were in, and so on and so forth. Again, only tangentially important when we think about meditation. But qi, after an organism has been born, or even during the gestation state, can be called qizhi, or the characteristic of a person's qi. And that's associated with specific life functions. That's associated with having a body. So what Neidan people have thought for a long time is that you have an existence even before you have a body. And you will have an existence even after you don't have a body. Maybe not the intellectual you, maybe not the ego that you associate with yourself, but the being that you are has already existed before your body existed and will continue to exist after your body exists. And so that's not reliant on having a physical characteristic. But as soon as you have a body, you have to have a physical characteristic. And if you don't, then you can't have a body. So that qi is associated with yin. Even though it has productive capacities, even though it has elements which are yang in nature, it's still associated with yin because physical form itself is associated with yin. If you look at Chinese cosmology, a little bit carefully. There's two big ideas. One is Tian, which means the heavens. One is Di, which means the earth. The heavens are considered to be entirely clear unless something is blocking them, and the earth is considered to be entirely solid unless something is cleaving it apart. And so there's one big yang and there's one big yin. So although most things are a mixture of yin and yang, generally the qi, the physical nature of qi, is considered to be essentially yin in nature. And so this is why they say that qi is associated with the seven po, because he's talking about the physical qi in the body. Now, Zhang Sanfeng is having a really interesting disagreement with some other Neidan thinkers. Basically, in previous generations, Neidan thinkers had said, the original qi of the body and the original spirit of the body and the original essence of the body, they're three types of yang energy. So basically, you were born with an original essence. You were generated in gestation, and it was pure yang because it was developing your body. And then the qi came and it developed your body more, so it was also yang. And then at the end, the spirit came and it wasn't polluted by thoughts, so it was yang too. So then you're born, and you only get post-heaven qi after you're born. Zhang Sanfeng, it seems like he sometimes agrees with that, but sometimes disagrees with that. But here, he's making a very clear distinction that the original qi within the body has a yin nature. So we'll read on and we'll see what he wants to say about that. But it's an interesting place to make a note. So then he says, the pre-heaven and post-heaven two types of qi, they combine into one. This is Kan and Li, water and fire, spontaneously mixing together, and Hun and Po joining together. Then the spirit and qi, they'll collect, and they'll generate embryonic breathing, which becomes then stable. So every day, it's like the husband and wife, they mix together in this beautiful, joyous situation. So that you shouldn't affect that. So to contextualize this in practice, it looks like he's saying, well, there's this pre-heaven qi, which is of one nature, and there's post-heaven qi, which is of another nature, and they have to mix as one. And so that is the job of Kan and Li. So if you look at Kan and Li, I think we did mention this before, but basically the Kan trigram is water and the Li trigram is fire. So Kan has one yang and Li has one yin. The yin feeling from Li is directed by the mind, which they call the matchmaker, to enter into Kan and blend together with the water and displace the yang energy, and then move in the body. So Hun and Po, they are mixed together in that capacity. How are they mixed together? The breathing, which is also a kind of qi, right? So when you breathe in, you're bringing oxygen in, which is qi. It's directed to the dantian, and it rests in the dantian and calms the mind. By calming the mind, it stops the Hun from going to the outside of the body. So the reason why you close your eyes when you practice Neidan is to stop the Hun from going away from the eyes. And so you close the eyes and ignore the outside stuff, and you stop paying attention to the outside world and just focus on the dantian and breathe there. And the idea is that attracts Hun and Po to reside together in the lower dantian. So it's not more complicated than that. It's very, very simple. And then from there, the spirit and the qi, they collect together. So there's two levels of this. The first level is the post-heaven, which is perception and breath seem to merge together and you enter into meditation. And the second level is pre-heaven. What happens when you're in deep meditation, when you're not conscious of it? The spirit and qi are mixing and they're covering each other, and you don't know about it until it generates some effect. Then after that, the Tai Shi, it becomes spontaneously stable. So Tai, fetus, Shi, breath, the breathing of the fetus. When you are breathing to your lower dantian, you want to make it really subtle and really soft, as I mentioned before, so the sound doesn't come in through the nose, and then it really relaxes the lower abdomen and rests there. So then it spontaneously becomes stable. So then this everyday affair of the husband and wife coming together in joy, you shouldn't work on affecting it. Basically what that means is when you're performing embryonic breathing, or when you're breathing and focusing on the lower dantian like that, you don't want to force the breath in. You don't want to force the mind there, right? It's like convincing two people that love each other to come together in union doesn't require any force. So when you practice meditation, you don't need to shove the breath down there. You don't need to stick the mind in there. Just let it be, and it'll come and go naturally. Canonly, they want to be together, and they want to create the energetic fetus. All you have to do is just allow them to go there spontaneously and without any effort on your own part. And if you have to use a little bit of effort, try to let go of it as quickly as possible. And then it will happen spontaneously, and everything will work together properly. So a very hands-off approach to meditation. So water and fire, they spontaneously cross. They emit, and they move to the four limbs. So what he's saying here is, like, once the practice is mature enough, then the energy will spontaneously move to the whole body. So it's like external fire is generated, and burning together like this, it requires water and fire to be level. This is a small exchange of the heavenly timing of the fire. So basically, when you're practicing well, the chi will move by itself, and all it requires is for your attention to rest within the water palace in such a way that you enter into a state of internal stability, and then it will move by itself. So he says, adjusting and harmonizing, it boils and steams, then the breath returns to the original sea. External yang spontaneously returns to the interior. The true fire spontaneously rises and penetrates upward. The whole body becomes soft and pliable. You'll feel joyful and without exhaustion. So again, here you adjust the boiling and steaming. All that means is just maintain your attention in the dantian, and then you breathe, and it arrives back at the original sea. The original sea is just, again, the term they're using for the lower dantian. So then the outer yang will naturally return inside. So remember, the outer yang is still associated with hun. We want to bring it back in just by calming ourselves and relaxing, right? Don't pay attention to what's going on outside. Just meditate and be peaceful and maintain inner awareness in the lower dantian and continue to breathe there. And then the true fire will spontaneously penetrate upward. So when the energy really opens properly, there's a specific effect called chongguan. Chong means to rush or to penetrate. It's this character I have highlighted there. And so basically the chi penetrates directly up the Du meridian, for instance. It could penetrate other meridians too, but generally the Du meridian. And it goes right into the brain. So basically, if you meditate properly and you enter into a really deep meditation state, and all of the yang returns to the inner body, then it will suddenly really open very strongly. It's very, very comfortable. And the entire body seems to feel joyful and without exhaustion, right? So at that point, the yang energy starts to move. It's one of the indications early in practice that the yang energy is starting to really move. And as the yang energy becomes more mature, you'll find that it makes your day a lot better when it happens. So the abdomen interior is like a living dragon that's rotating and rising and falling, moving and rotating, rising and falling. And so one day it has 10 of these transformations. The child and the fine girl may naturally merge. Then you must harvest the yin and cover the yang as one joint. So what he's saying here is that this rising of the energy, if you were meditating for 24 hours a day, good luck with that. But basically, you could get 10 risings of yang energy every day if you happen to put all of your effort into meditation. 1 or 2 is really, really sufficient. There was a great article written by a Taiwanese master. There's a book called Fang Dao or something like that. It means interviewing the Taoists. And it was this Neidan practitioner who went around Taiwan and interviewed everybody who was doing Neidan, and one of the masters said, even if the yang energy only moves once or twice a year, that's totally sufficient. So if you see these things, don't worry about it. You don't have to emulate it. It would take a lot of work to get this to happen 10 times in a day. So the child and the fine girl joining together. Again, the child is just the qi inside of the dantian. So once the dantian qi is strong enough and is starting to fill up the dantian, that's just the qi there. The post-heaven qi is the post-heaven aspect of the child, right? That part which can be felt. The pre-heaven qi is the pre-heaven aspect of the child, that part which is in deep meditation. The fine girl, again, is still referring to the feeling of the spirit, so the yin aspect of the spirit, which has feeling. So basically the feeling mixes together with the qi and the dantian, and they spontaneously merge. This is called harvesting yin to repair yang. So when it says here, harvest yin and cover the yang as one joint, actually what it really says, I kind of butchered it there. It says, this is harvesting yin to repair yang. And when it says one joint, what it means is that this is one part of practice that you have to go through, is that once you have the qi very abundantly in your dantian, then you have to let your feeling and your attention mix together with it and merge. So then the yin, which is the feeling, it joins together with the yang, and the yang can become stronger. So people who cultivate the jade fluid returning the elixir, they have to start with the basic of refining the self. They have to accumulate the internal, let's say the internal treasures of the method, and all the time, so until if they do it successfully, until the last day, they'll be completely free. And all night they will always be shining brightly. This is the basic ability of long life and eternal vision. So, or we can say long life and extended vision, I guess. So basically, what he's saying is, if you get to the point where the yang energy is very strong, and it moves abundantly and very quickly in the Du Meridian up the body, and then it collects back into the dantian, and you can merge the qi and the dantian together with the feeling and hold it together there peacefully, then this is sufficient to get you to the stage of actually improving your longevity prospects. So you haven't become an immortal, but at least you have improved your longevity prospects. And one of the things that I found by reading a lot of old documents is that they had analyzed the different levels of practice. So sometimes you'll read a book like Zhuangzi, and they talk about things like Zhiren, right, the arrived person, or Zhenren, the realized person, and so on. They analyzed those things in a lot of detail, and they created delineated stages of realization that they could judge by the type of experiences that they were having. Now, what they probably hadn't thought of, or perhaps didn't care about, is that in the 21st century, there would be a lot of dilettantes who achieved the things that they achieved in 3 years over the course of like 20 years. And so it presents us with the need to redefine certain terms, because you can experience these very high-level stages of practice if you just practice for long enough, but because you still live in, a state of karmic affliction as a result of not completely cutting yourself off from the world, then it means things like becoming a Zhenren or a realized person maybe isn't just a spontaneous result of meditation anymore. But these are things that will require the Taoists of the present and the future to revisit from the theoretical lens and perhaps change some of the theory to make up for the fact that most of us don't completely cut ourselves off from the world. And that's perhaps beside the point. So the people of the world eat the 5 grains to nurture life. If they spend many days without eating, they will die. If people are of old age, their original energy declines, the bone and marrow are all empty, they cannot obtain the benefit from the 5 grains And the 5 grains nourish people but also injure people. If one can merge the inner and outer, water and fire become equal, the chi and blood reverse circulation, the 5 organs are joined, the spleen and stomach open and fill, food enters the belly center, it's possible to transform chi and generate the essence and nurture spirit. So what he's saying is, it's really interesting, actually, because this stuff was written right around the same time that a really fundamental Chinese medicine document called Piwei Lun was written. So Piwei Lun means discussion of the spleen and stomach. And the thesis of Piwei Lun is that if people are malnourished, they get sick. And so they talk about the 5 grains as being very, very important to nourishing life, right? So it was around the same period of time that Chinese medicine was starting to look at nutrition in a very serious way and develop Shiliao, right? The method of treatment based on nutrition. The Taoists are looking at this and they're saying, well, yeah, but like, look, people, they get damaged by food. And on top of that, as you get older, you can't save your life with food, right? Because your body doesn't absorb the nutrition as well, or it doesn't revive you into a young person, right? So they're saying, well, you should practice Neidan, right? Don't only seek health through nutrition, but make sure you do something which actually has the ability to alter you on a physiological level, which from their perspective is meditation practice. So he says, if people achieve this method of practicing the heavenly system, it can directly fill the bone and marrow. The stomach fills like a pregnant woman, but it is not a fetus shape within it. It is qi filling and the essence increasing, the shen being full. If these 3 are complete, then the true fire may be refined, adjusting the spirit and refining the void. The great master who practices this will be known for a long time after they're gone. So, important point here. When he says the heavenly system, he's referring principally to the interaction of time and chi, or time and spirit, but chi is a general idea. So everybody knows that there's different amounts of light in the sky relative to time of year. Everybody knows that there's different amount of wakefulness relative to time of day. And most of us know that our habits have a direct impact on how we feel. So looking at the heavenly system, the idea is just to adjust our habits so that they're in harmony with the relative nature of the world around us. This is equal parts intuitive and knowledge-based. You could learn it intuitively. It's actually not that hard. But having a little bit of knowledge just about what to expect at different times of the year and different times of the day can push you even farther toward getting it faster. If you use that to guide your meditation, then you'll get a better energetic effect. And the short and simple of it is basically the solstices and the equinoxes. About a month before those things happen, it's good to really put more energy into meditation. In the 15 days leading up to the full moon, and even the last couple days after the full moon, you should put more energy into meditation. And in the dark moon, you can meditate, but don't use very much intention because the chi won't do as much. Those are the most essential points. And then the other essential point is basically nighttime before bed, morning right after waking up. Approximately sometime around midday and then early evening are basically the 4 best times to meditate. Now, there's other times too that they don't mention, and there's other little tricky things like, the intersection of like 10 p.m. and 11 p.m., but this is the basic sketch of the thing. So if you get good at meditating and you're able to properly take advantage of time and space, then it's possible to quote unquote fill the bone and the marrow. But remember, when he says marrow, he doesn't mean bone marrow. He means the marrow of the spine, because they conceptualize the spinal cord as a kind of marrow within bone, and the nerves is something coming out from the marrow. And so the marrow is the brain, the spine, and so on and so forth. The stomach fills like a pregnant woman. What does the stomach fill with? Well, first, the stomach fills with breath. not oxygen, but it fills with the breath coming and going. I think we can all agree with that. But the second thing it fills with is chi. And so the breath and the chi are two kinds of chi, right? The breath is this post-heaven aspect which generates post-heaven chi in the body, but then at the same time there's also the pre-heaven chi. So all of those things come together in the abdomen, and then because when he says he doesn't say stomach. Sorry, that was my very colloquial translation. He says fu. Fu means abdomen. So not stomach, because it would be bad to think about it only as the upper stomach. So it fills up. Why does it become like a pregnant woman? Because the chi is living inside of it. It's not that the abdomen has to necessarily jut out, right? You might, relative to the shape of your abdomen, you may have exactly the same size of abdomen as you had before, but it's the living energy inside of it that makes you feel more alive. That why he's talking about it becoming like a pregnant woman. And it's an important differentiation. I know it might seem nitpicky, but the thing is that in ancient Taoist practice, when they were doing a lot of tuna, a lot of grasping, spitting and grasping, they would really inflate the abdomen up a lot. And there were a number of different indications actually in some of the texts, including in the Small Taoist Canon, where they actually said, when you practice this, it's not unusual to notice a red color in your blood, in your urine. So the reason why I always emphasize this is we're not going for that filling of the abdomen. We're going for something very spontaneous and natural. So don't force it. Red color in your urine is definitely something that you don't want to have happen to you, especially by practicing something that's supposed to be healthy. So then, going on from there, it's not a fetus shape within it. It's the chi filling and the essence increasing, and the shen being full, right? So by the time that you get enough chi in your abdomen to really make it feel abundant, it's because the spirit and the chi are mixing together, and the chi is becoming an extra sense. So the post-heaven chi ends up becoming an extra sensory organ, like the eyes, like the ears, like the mouth, like the nose, like the tongue, like the tactile sensation. The chi becomes a sort of second tactile sensation, and it can be in the entire body, and it can even feel things outside the body to a certain extent. So that's a matter of the chi and the shen mixing together, and the shen fortifying the chi, and the chi allowing the shen to have something to ride on, so that the shen is able to do its job more completely. So if these three things are complete, then the true fire may be refined. Adjusting the spirit and refining the void, the great master who practices this will be known for a long time. So the true fire is when the spirit doesn't have any more yin inside of it during practice. So when you meditate and realize clarity and maintain clarity, that's working with the true fire. Adjusting the spirit and refining the void. Adjusting the spirit in this case means clarifying and making still and making silent. Refining the void means realizing the essential nature of emptiness. So that's the second highest level of practice in Neidan that he's talking about there. Realizing true emptiness. It happens over a long period of time. It's not a sudden thing. It's not like you suddenly go from intermediate practice all the way into advanced practice. It's more like the advanced practice starts creeping up on you over time as you start to realize the nature of emptiness. So the great master who practices this will be known for a long time after they're gone. What he's saying is a person who can fully realize this has a very respectable level of accomplishment, basically. So those who practice this must find an ancestor teacher, then be completely clear about the inner and outer of the body, begin practice and refining, refine yourself, then wait. Later, one yang will arrive. Select the earth and enter the room. Refine the dragon and tiger great elixir. You must remain still and find a place with neither call of cock or bark of dog. Externally, must also have some Taoist friends who are keen of hearing and will not let even one contentious person enter for fear that they will excite your original spirit. So what he's saying is, remember that this essay is about experience, right? He's trying to help you through his own experience or his students' experience or the experience of his masters to understand what the appropriate way to practice this thing is. So the idea here is that when you're ready to start practicing, number one, you have to learn the method. So you have to talk to somebody who's done it, or at least who's done a lot of it. And then you have to be completely clear about the theory so that when you go into isolation to practice, you're going to be able to do it successfully. Now, this is one approach. It's not the only approach. The other approach, which is probably the more modern one, is we understand that we're not going into isolation, at least not frequently, right? We might go into isolation once or twice a year, but generally we're in society. We're practicing gradually over time, and we accept that because we accept the responsibility of our lives. And so as a result of that, you still want to have a pretty good theoretical foundation before you start practicing, but it's possible to learn it over time and to have continual interactions with your teachers, with your Taoist friends, and with the community that allow you to reinforce the skills over a certain period of time so that you don't have to learn everything all at once and then go into a dark cave and just go for it and just spend 8 years in there and then, hope that you don't die or become insane. In modern times, we look at it more gradually, but what you maybe can take away from this is it's very useful to have as much knowledge as you can going into it before you start so that you make less mistakes. So then he says, when you begin your practice, you need to pick the appropriate time or wait for the appropriate time. Then what will happen eventually is the one yang will arrive. The one yang arriving means that you have the ability then to cultivate this internal energy that can get stronger. So then you have to make sure that you pick the right place to practice, right? And then enter the room. So when he says pick the right place to practice or pick the earth, right? He means practice in a place that's conducive to meditation. Don't practice in a loud or a crazy place or a place where you're likely to get into a vexatious situation. Having said that, if you're good at it, you can practice anywhere. But at the start, it's good to practice in a quiet place. And then refine this Dragon and Tiger Great Elixir. Now, the idea of Dragon and Tiger Great Elixir, this has been a really badly misinterpreted in the last 30 years. There's an academic named Hu Fu Chen who I will usually praise and say is wonderful. He does a very good job of Neidan academia, but he's really the only one out there who's doing the most detailed work. And he misinterpreted the idea of Dragon and Tiger Elixir as a particular type of practice which is associated with Tongleifa, so the mutual categories that I think we mentioned before, where basically you use one thing to focus on another thing. When they say Dragon, Tiger, Great Elixir in these texts, what they mean is the elixir of the dragon and tiger coming together. So what is that? Generally in Neidan practice, all of that refers to is that there's yin energy in the lower body, which is referred to as the tiger. Inside of it, the yin energy has yang. That's usually referred to as the tiger claw. In the upper body, there's yang energy, which is our perception. They call it dragon because the spirit is always being drawn outside and flying around like a dragon. But the dragon, it has a yin characteristic, which is to embrace a pearl. And so the idea of embracing a pearl is that it can embrace the energy or the spirit. So you direct the yang aspect of cognition to calm down and enter into the yin aspect of the essence, which is what they're calling tiger. And then that ability of the dragon to hold the pearl is what holds the tiger's claw, so to speak. And so the spirit, which is yang, ends up being at rest because it's embracing this pearl inside of the lower abdomen, which is the yang hidden inside of the yin. It's just another way of saying the Shen and the Jing are held together and they're allowed to rest together. So when they say Dragon and Tiger Elixir, he's not talking about a special style of Neidan or anything secret like that. It's a metaphor just to describe putting yang and yin together in the configuration that we use in Neidan practice. So from there he says, you must remain still and find a place with neither call of cock or bark of dog. So practice in a place that's not externally vexatious. Externally, you must also have some Taoist friends who are keen of hearing and who will not let even one contentious person enter for fear that they will excite your original spirit. So this is an issue in Neidan. Not a big problem at the start, but it can be a big problem later. Which is that at the start of practice, everything is very nice and very easy. And if you have some mental disturbance, it won't cause too much trouble. You might get a little bit annoyed or whatever, but generally you can still practice. Once the qi really starts going to the upper dantian at the end of the large orbit practice, you start hallucinating a lot. And so you gotta have, if you wanted to do the whole practice all in one go, you would really need to find a place to be very peaceful, because the hallucinations are going to come at the higher level of practice. And if you get disturbed during that state, it could be really bad for you psychologically. But as normal practice, or as normal people, when we meditate incrementally, it's not as much of a bother, because by the time you get to the stage where the qi is really in the upper dantian, and you start to have these, what they call mojang, right? The demon hindrances. By that time, you have already fortified yourself psychologically, because you spent a lot of years thinking about how to practice and researching Neidan. So this is one place where incremental practice is really helpful, because when these hallucinations come, by the way, which is nothing compared to LSD, so don't worry about it. If you've ever had a really strong acid trip, you'll be fine. But no, I'm not encouraging that. I'm just saying, and it's better to come at it incrementally rather than trying to do it all at once, because otherwise, if you get disturbed during that state, it could be really bad. But I can say from my personal experience that the hallucinations are never they're never something that leads me down a bad path. When they come, I just recognize what they are, and I immediately put myself back into deep meditation. Sometimes they have narrative. It's like a dream. I always forget it afterward. The main point is don't follow it. So if, let's say, a deity appears in front of your eyes, and it looks just as real as day, and it's like one of these Taoist deities that you see in the pictures of the, just don't follow it. Don't worry about it. It's not significant. It's not trying to tell you something. It's your mind doing this particular thing because your qi is all in your upper dantian. Just keep your attention in your abdomen. Keep meditating silently, and it'll go away, and it'll generate the right thing. So the key point with this, Zhang Sanfeng says, if you're going to do the practice all at once, you better not let any weirdos in. You're going to have some guards in front of the door so that these people don't come bother you. But for us, just be aware that anything that happens mentally, return back to peace, return back to calm, and it will go away. And as long as you don't follow up on it, then you won't feel like you have the need to start a cult later. So, so that's as much as I have to say about that particular topic. First, speaking of harmonizing the light. Oh, by the way, sorry, one more thing. I do have one more thing to say about that. Don't worry if your original spirit gets a little bit excited. Just learn to calm it down over time. I have one really big suggestion, which is that if you want to practice Neidan properly, you need to look into the concept of abstention. It is very difficult to become good at Neidan without learning to abstain from, in recent parlance, they call this toxic emotion. So the idea that we have these propensities to become angry or vexed or depressed, and a lot of them are related to our thoughts, both verbal and nonverbal, and our patterns that we live in. And so the idea of abstention, I use Confucius as my guidebook for abstentions, but the religious guys have their own rules. Basically, the idea is you look at your life in totality and you say, where are the places that I have the most emotional problems that lead to negative thought patterns and negative behaviors? Try to find the appropriate ways to manage those as you practice your meditation career. And then you'll be able to simultaneously cut away bad habits as you get better at meditation. So by the time you get to a higher level, then your negative thought patterns will be diminished enough that you're living relatively peacefully, and so that you're not in conflict all the time. And so the problem of the spirit getting disturbed, well, you get angry sometimes, or you get sad sometimes, or you feel natural human emotions because you're human, but they won't carry you away with them into delusional state. So then it won't be in conflict with your practice. Otherwise, if you get emotionally disturbed to the point where it completely takes over your mind and you can't become calm, then it does conflict with meditation practice, and it will cause a certain amount of damage. So it's very important to recognize that early on. Find a set of abstentions that you agree with. It doesn't have to be Taoist, doesn't have to be Confucius. Like if Christianity or Judaism or something speaks to you, whatever, you can practice Neidan and still keep a whole other set of values. They're not in conflict, unless you think they are. I think that let's leave the document there. We'll pick it up again next week. This is a long document, and it deserves, I think, 2 weeks, and then in the following week, then we'll probably be able to start in on the next one. It wouldn't be good to go too much farther in this because there's a lot of depth, and we want to make sure that we cover it in detail. So does anybody have any questions or comments before we finish today? Yeah, go for it, Mark.
I was a little bit confused over the discussion of the 5 grains before. It seemed to me I've heard that for longevity, it's advocated to abstain from grains altogether. So how does that relate to what they were talking about and that sort of thing?
Yeah, sure. So the 5 grains in Chinese thought are basically like the 5 types of carbohydrates that people are using frequently, right? I think it's rice, millet, I think barley is one of them. I don't know all of them. There's a whole bunch, like Job's Pearl or Job's Tears, whatever that's called. And in very ancient times, so before Neidan was created, the proto-Taoists, right, the people who would eventually become the Taoists, they came to the recognition that if you are eating certain kinds of grain, they stay in the digestive system for a long time, and they cause the stomach to fill, basically. So the stomach fills, and the grains take a certain period of time to digest. So they looked at that, and they looked at the problem of having foodborne illnesses, right? So food in the ancient world was way less safe than, well, food's not safe now, but for a different reason. Food in the ancient world wasn't sanitary. And so there were a lot of foodborne illnesses. People would die of dysentery, right? And so they looked at that and they said, well, this seems to have, there's some influence of food and our diet on our health. And we could see that when we're consuming a lot of these carbohydrates, that they're making the digestive process more difficult. So they came up with this idea, which was abstaining from grain. But abstaining from grain can't be done by itself because you'll get really hungry. So they did something else. They said, abstain from grain and eat the breath. So the very, very first breath-based Qigong document is called the document of abstaining from grains and eating the breath. The principle wasn't that you don't eat at all, but it was that you specifically don't eat grain or based food. And then second, that when you, instead of eating grain-based food, you meditate all the time, and you keep your breath in your lower abdomen, or in your whole abdomen actually, and it makes you feel full. So the method they would use to do that is they'd take really big breaths, like, and then hold them for a long period of time, and they'd get incrementally better and better at holding them, and then let them out slowly through the mouth using various different techniques. The idea was that was supposed to make you feel not hungry. And because they were meditating and they weren't exerting a great deal of power, going out and doing work, because all the original Taoists were aristocrats, so they didn't have to work, then they were able to eat a lot less and still maintain a sense of health. Whether or not they maintained health is another question. Now, gradually over time, Taoists have begun to eat grains and fast in specific contexts at specific times. So when you do bigu, right, which means abstaining from grain, that is usually done around the solstice. And it's a very specific time. The fasting has a method. It's not just stopping eating. It's you eat specific foods and fast at specific times and practice in specific ways. This is my teacher does do bigu occasionally, but what he's told me is basically following a balanced diet, but specifically eating foods which are lighter tasting is generally the right protocol for practicing. So you don't want to eat foods which are excessively, perfumed or excessively spicy or excessively, sweet or carb heavy or whatever. But other than that, it's okay to follow a normal diet as long as it's balanced. And once the diet starts to be unbalanced, then you get sick in different ways. But the idea of abstaining from grain is not absolutely mandatory, and most Taoists do eat some grains in their diets. However, there are certain lessons that we can take, like glutinous white rice is basically poison. I would really stay away from glutinous white rice for the most part. For me personally, I have systemic skin issues which are aggravated by wheat. These are things where we might look at specific grains and use a slightly more, let's say, reductionist approach to understanding what we should and shouldn't eat based on our own pathologies. I think that would be, in ancient times, they created meta-categories where they kind of looked at everybody through the same lens. But I think more and more that we should align ourselves with science a little bit more, and perhaps say it's possible for me to find out my own pathologies through my interactions with the medical community, and then I can make my decisions based on that, rather than necessarily taking these very sort of weird meta rules like abstaining from the 5 grains, which were eventually essentially brushed under the carpet in Taoism anyway. Does that sort of adequately cover the question?
Well, it's all very interesting, but it's like from a Western science standpoint, I know that there's such a thing as essential amino acids, and there's such a thing as essential fats. There's no such thing as essential carbohydrates. There's nothing essential about eating carbohydrates, provided you're getting your energy from other things. So it seems like one could cut them out entirely if it was actually good for you to do so. And there are some carbohydrate-related aging effects. In fact, they call them AGEs, AGE, advanced glycosylation end products, I believe they're called, which are sort of like the carbohydrate version of oxidants. How air can be bad for you through oxidation. Carbohydrates can be bad for you through the advanced glycosylation end products. And so the idea of avoiding grains entirely seems to me somewhat a reasonable insight, perhaps.
Yeah, I think that one of the takeaways that we can obtain through looking at old traditions, not just the Taoist tradition, I think also looking at things like the Hippocratic tradition and the medieval traditions of medicine as well, is that a lot of their knowledge was come to through people like to use the term holistic, but I think a lot of it was come to through empirical observation. So they would use their senses to discern as much evidence about things as they could, and then they would sort of set their axioms and paradigms within the context of the sensory evidence that they gathered. And in modern times we would say, oh, that's a very heuristic way of doing things, right? We don't have a very solid basis to set our our concepts in. But I think that there's a lot to be said for heuristic knowledge, and that the ancient people were far from ignorant. So when they talk about, there's a diversity of understanding about this in Chinese medicine and Taoism, and some Chinese medicine texts are all about the benefits of grains and how you can use grains to nurture yourself, and I think that we can find also probably both modern scientific evidence for that as well as empirical evidence for that, and some of the documents are saying no, grains are all bad, and I think you can also find evidence for that as well. And so I think again it would be a matter of having to look into it a lot, and what we end up with as individual people is that we still have to make all kinds of heuristic decisions every day about the food we eat, about our sleep cycles, about everything we do in our lives. And so basically what I'd advocate is that if you think it's a useful pursuit to go into that way of thinking and compare it against modern science, then not only is it a good idea to investigate it for yourself, it's also a good idea that once you are sufficiently confident in your findings, that you share it with the community, because potentially this widens our knowledge base. And this is one of my sort of big hopes, is that as we have people looking into the intersections of Taoism and Chinese medicine and modern medicine, that we can end up with a productive situation where our practice gets pushed forward. Whereas there's also a lot of people who are of the opinion that just a very conservative and old-fashioned approach to practice is what they like. But that's not my stance. I think that if you look into it, I hope that you'll look into it in a very robust way, and that we'll be able to read your paper when it's ready.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. So I think I will call it a day now. I'm going to take my wife to the antique market. So we'll see you guys again soon. Take care.
Recording.